As I sit here on the beach looking as dramatic as I possibly can, it's important for you to understand the extent of my obsession for this island. My friends briefly mentioned a reason as to why this might be.
I would say that this island, it's a hippie island.
There are some special people you meet here and you create this connection that really goes deep into you.
You see, Cuckooland, as I've now baptised it, was the first place I ever went to that was filled with kind-hearted, open-minded, accepting and unconventional people.
I haven't been sleeping for the past 3 nights, just too excited.
I met a Syrian refugee here called Rad that expressed a similar thought. Here, he felt seen, and 3 years ago I did too.
I feel weird. Why do I feel weird?
After 3 years of obsessive daydreaming, the island was now overwhelmingly real again.
I just feel neutral, like at peace with this place.
This is my good friend from Barcelona, Marcel. If I had to very quickly describe Marcel, I would say imagine a puppy and a granddad living in the same body. I'll leave it at that. He's just one of those people that I associate my first summer on the island to.
You're going to do a lot of editing. This is my fourth summer in the island.
I believe we kept in touch because we experienced the island in a similar way that year and have viewed it similarly ever since. Marcel has now spent 4 summers in a row here, and he's far from being the only one. If anything, 4 is on the shorter side. Had I had the resources to do so, I probably would have returned back every summer since too.
It makes you feel like home, wherever you go all around the island. And then when you go outside, you remember it as a dream. You are not even so sure that it's a real thing. So for me, first time on the island 3 years ago, it was like a breakthrough.
Same. But how did I even discover this place? Back in the summer of 2018, I decided to volunteer on a random eco project I found online. That eco project happened to be here. I came here having never heard of the island. It was all new, which is a big reason I believe it grew to be such a special experience. Not only was it my first time travelling alone, but I was travelling to a place I had no preconceived notions of. This is why I'm not interested in sharing the exact name of the island. It's special to me because it's attached to a deeply personal experience. Your Cuckooland is somewhere else, and I wish you all the best if you haven't found it yet. The Eco Project was actually where I met Marcel. That experience will forever go down as one of the weirdest experiences we'll probably ever be a part of.
Often here you create connections with people with very meaningful. And it stays with you, even when you are outside. It is like a dream to be here.
But without such a weird experience, illustrated by the most random pictures to remember it by, I firmly believe this island wouldn't be what it has become to me, living in a way I had never lived before, all while surrounded by an eclectic group of people. It was a summer of firsts, feeling free and independent for the first time in my life.
I'm going to find the right person. Definitely here this way. Tequila. And then lemon.
Coming back after 3 years was a perfect way to finally process all of those memories properly.
And be very close to nature. I think this is a big part of why it's a special place.
Marcel described that summer as the perfect summer, but at the end of the day, nothing can be perfect, not even a summer in Cuckooland. Like I've previously stated, very little was captured from that summer. Only random moments from my first 2 weeks have been immortalised through film, and the first 2 weeks felt light and playful. After that, the experience lives in my head, and after that is when things got interesting but intense. Saying it was perfect would be invalidating the experience as a whole, and the overall experience was an internal, emotional, nuclear explosion.
It will take some time this, and then you're going to edit the good part, right? Like we can talk.
But there was one thing I always wanted to do if ever I were to go back. Climb the mountain. As someone with an intense fear of heights, climbing that mountain always seemed like the perfect way to turn buried bad memories into small, insignificant details. For the moment, this has proven itself to be, quite frankly, one of the most difficult things I've ever done. Not just because of the incline, but the heat, the lack of sleep, the weight on my back. I've never done a hike with that much weight. Climbing this mountain means a lot. I'm not at the peak quite yet. I have very paralyzing vertigo, so I'm excited to see how that's going to go tomorrow, to climb to the top in the dark to see sunrise. But I'll think about that tomorrow morning as it's happening. I'm not going to worry about that quite yet. But climbing this mountain and seeing this island that means so much to me from a different perspective, from a perspective that I've never seen before, will help me a lot. And just having conquered this thing that I really always wanted to do since the first time I came here, it just, it feels like if I can do this, everything else that will happen in the next 2 months will be okay.
On va y aller, hein. Ouais. Ça a cogné, ça va aller, je pense.
Once we came down, it began to sink in how little time Cher had left on the island. This place that I always associated to a solo experience was now associated to her, and leaving that comfort and safety she provided me with felt scary. But the best experiences always lie beyond fear. And besides, it was time I faced certain things alone. One of Cher's last days was spent with 2 musicians we met while hitchhiking. We drove to the south side of the island and spent the day eating good food, drinking wine, having good conversations and playing music. There was a certain atmosphere to that day that felt comforting and familiar. It exuded the feeling I remember my first summer having. It was a feeling of familiarity I can't quite put into words. It was bittersweet. A part of me was sad that Cher was leaving when things were starting to feel right, but another part of me was relieved that this feeling was appearing before my fear of being alone got too loud. But I spoke too soon, because that day things ended up feeling too familiar, and it got too overwhelming. I really don't know why the thought of filming myself while ugly crying ever crossed my mind, but I'm glad it did. This way, this summer will be remembered for everything it truly was, the good and the bad. The things I needed to deal with alone had officially fully rose to the surface, and in this moment it felt unfair. I cried every hour that day, and that's good. Just why when my best friend was gone? Remember, this island is an island invaded by people that modern-day society would classify as hippies. Here, a body is nothing but a body, and I'll leave it at that. Sorry, Mum. What I was dealing with is unimportant to the story. That being said, there is something I do want to remember from these days. The way in which I treated myself. I let all the people who I had befriended know that I would need a few days to be alone, and that's exactly what I did. I sat with the pain I'd always neglected and felt it. Desperate times called for comforting measures. I stretched, I swam, and I wrote. And I continued until I felt better. Until I forgave myself for not being there for myself until now. One day, after a decent amount of time of being alone, I went to a restaurant and started to feel overwhelmed again. I knew it was time to be surrounded by people again. Jules, this guy, had just arrived on the island. I met him back in 2018. We didn't know each other that well, but he was a fellow Brit, and for some reason that felt comforting to be around. He was also the one to put me in touch with Nikos and Frosso, my friends from the full moon. Jules was the missing puzzle piece to that friend group, and once he arrived, it felt like the summer could officially begin. But first things first, before a new beginning can occur, self-forgiveness is mandatory.
Holy is the sunrise, clear as the water. I was so naive
If 20-year-old Anna could walk this,
to think a man could be
I just
stronger than me. I
deserve a hug.
stronger